Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. When the Vikings play the Colts on Saturday, will Kirk Cousins be looking into his quarterback ghost of Christmas's future in Matt Ryan?
Arif Hasan at Pro Football Network. I have successfully eliminated one of the Lukes. Which one? You'll find out in a couple of seconds.
It's me. Sorry to disappoint. Luke Inman, Superior Sports Talk. Watching the snow fall outside my window, I can't help but ponder why the Wilfs were such cowards and didn't build an outdoor stadium. It's a shame. It's a shame.
It's the Minnesota football party. And Luke, don't use the word ponder on my podcast.
Too soon?
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcasts. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hasan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota football party. And it starts now.
Welcome in, everyone, to the Minnesota football party on a snowy Thursday in the Twin Cities. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota, Arif Hasan, Pro Football Network at Arif Hasan NFL, and Luke Inman of Superior Sports Talk. He's at Luke_Spinman on Twitter. No Luke Braun today, so Arif and Ron at some point during the show will probably pester him behind his back, which is, totally above board. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Kirk Cousins versus Matt Ryan comparison that I teased. We'll have a thorough Colts preview. We'll talk to Ron Johnson and why can't the Colts run the ball with Jonathan Taylor. We'll address all of that and more on this show, which you can find on Amazon Fire and Roku. If you have those programs, you can watch us on the big screen, 80-inch TV. Everyone's getting the new TVs for the holiday season. Smart TVs oftentimes, Amazon Fire and Roku. Find us there. Also find us on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe there. You can get us on video, or you can find us on audio wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, folks, we're free, and we are available. Vikings-Colts, 48 hours from now. It's coming up fast. I've got so much to talk about with the Colts, but I want to start with just some overview topics on some Vikings players that I would say are having difficult to evaluate seasons in some cases. There's three I want to focus on in particular. Adam Thielen, Eric Kendricks, Danielle Hunter. Those are the three names I sent you. I'm curious what your satisfaction level is with their 2022 performance this season, because I think that the expectations were fairly high for all three. I'm curious how you guys view where they're at right now. Arif Hasan, we'll go with you. We'll start with Adam Thielen. How do you feel like he's done this year?
Honestly, when you look at it from like an all-22 perspective, if you don't look at it from like a production metrics perspective, or you take a look at how well he gets open, how much he's catching the ball when he is getting targeted, how accurate those passes are, I think that he's playing pretty well. I think that there is something in the red zone production that they need to kind of dip back into the well for, but I think more this is just a product of the scheme and Kirk Cousins and kind of this new offense not catching up to all the weapons that they have. I think that we do need to be concerned about an age cliff for Thielen. I don't think that the play that he's had this year is kind of hitting it. I think that the problem is really just production, and he doesn't really control a lot of that. I think that mostly, he's playing well. Is he the Adam Thielen that he was in like 2018? Absolutely not. But I think that he is a fairly high-level receiver. I'd put him in the top 20 in the NFL. But it's just not there for whatever reason. And I think one way to get this offense a little bit better is to make sure that it is there.
Arif's right. All in all, I think he's been pretty solid. I remember sitting at training camp next to Luke Braun, watching Adam Thielen come out and jog around and move around a little bit. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, is this the beginning? Is he starting to show a little signs of maybe losing a step? To Arif's point, you got to worry about him now physically. And not to the point where, like, he wouldn't or couldn't still be effective. His game isn't built on speed or being a burner. He wins at the top of his routes, still has good hands, and that all translates into maybe more longevity as wideouts start to lose some of the physical attributes as they get older. I think that's exactly what we've seen this year. A tick slower, maybe, but still a good route runner. Maybe not the most physical guy in his routes, still a great technician, though, and the hands are still there. All in all, I think this entire offense, not just Thielen, really took a month or two to really get going. He's had fairly good production, though, as Arif mentioned along the way. The numbers, they're still going to end up being solid by year's end. What I'm more worried about is what he looks like next year, because now that the drop in speed and physical tools has maybe started, I guess it's only fair to assume that it's going to continue to only get worse over time here from here on out. So for a guy that's due, 19 million next season, it's going to be really hard to justify paying him anything remotely close to that, especially when he shows up to camp another year older and likely another tick slower as well.
With Thielen, you definitely have to account for Justin Jefferson taking the lion's share of the targets. This is no more 1A and 1B with Diggs. I think it is clearly Jefferson 1, Thielen 2. So you do have to account for that and say, okay, well, is he still efficient when getting targeted? And the answer is not necessarily. I mean, his yards per route run is the lowest in his career. His yards after catch per reception, the lowest in his career. That might speak to the injury he's trying to play through. His contested catches, the lowest in his career. And that was something that Thielen was always really good at. And this year, there have been a lot of moments where you say, all right, that's a tough catch. You didn't drop it. But I expect Adam Thielen to make those plays, and he's 4 of 17 this year on contested catches. Obviously, it's a volatile stat. It comes and goes, small sample size, but just little things here and there. And I do wonder if the injury is part of that. However, the injury equation is adding up not in Thielen's favor now, because now it's 3 consecutive years impacted by injuries. He's been able to play through this one pretty well. He's only missed a handful of reps, amazingly, considering he's had a chronic knee issue the whole year and has been able to battle through it. So he deserves props for that. But 3 years in a row, the lower body's breaking down. So Luke hits it on the head. The $19 million is untenable, but that dead cap is still super high too. Like, it's going to require a serious sacrifice on Thielen's part, and for him to look in the mirror and say, I know that I'm not playing up to this salary. I am willing to take less money. Because, Arif, maybe you're a little more well-versed in this. If he says absolutely not, then the Vikings have to eat 13. Is that the deal next year? Or they have to pay him the 19?
They will have to pay him the 13 kind of regardless, just whatever happens, but they'll have options to kind of reduce the cap hit with forced restructures and stuff like that. Stuff that's like in the CBA and in contracts where you can convert, remaining prorated signing bonus into again, a signing bonus or remaining base salary guarantees into signing bonuses. But obviously, one of the impacts of that is that you commit to that player for longer than you otherwise would have. So they'll have options to reduce the cap hit, but the amount of cash they have committed to Thielen, that's just going to stay the way it is, right? And so whether or not the $19 million, I believe, cap hit next year is going to be what his cap hit is actually going to be next year, I kind of doubt it. But they'll have options to either forcibly restructure the contract within the structures that have already been agreed to through negotiations, or kind of strong arm him into saying, "Hey, this is what you actually want."
And as we sit here, I know we're going to talk a lot about this contract and a lot of these contracts throughout the offseason, because that cap right now, the way it is pretty ugly. Kwesi's going to have a lot of work to do this offseason. But another thing to keep in mind is, how long does he want to continue to play too? I mean, he'll be 33 next year. Sam, you mentioned 3 straight years of lower body injuries. That takes his toll. And just the whole background, the whole story. He's already had such a successful career. He probably wants to retire in Minnesota. He's not going to do, I wouldn't guess, you never know, but I doubt he does that journeyman thing these last 2, 3, 4 years and hops around team to team. He wants to end in purple, but how many more years does he even want to play? That's something to keep in mind too. And obviously we don't know the answer to that, but I can't imagine it's too much longer to where he, unlike a lot of players, are going to play themselves to where they just physically just can't go out there and play anymore. I think he wants to leave somewhat on a high note and leave on top. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. 19 million either way, as Arif mentioned, that's just a hard pill to swallow. I don't see that happening.
I would predict if I'm a betting man, I would say that they renegotiate and get the cap number and salary down to 12 or 13 for 1 year, and they expedite his free agency. I think that they will come to a decision that, all right, we're going to be year to year. So you can play for a healthy salary next year, but then we're going to do this year to year. So the next year, if you want to stick around, it might be 8. The next year after that, it might be 5. And that's kind of the way Fitzgerald ended things in Arizona, because he wanted to retire there. And I think Thielen, you're right, Luke, might want to be the same way. Now, 2 guys that have expiring deals next year, Kendricks and Hunter. We've gone back and forth on Hunter this year. Let's talk about Kendricks, though, first, because Kendricks, I think, has been a victim somewhat of this scheme. His pass coverage is bottoming out, the worst it's been, I think, in his career. And that's a big question, whether it's execution or scheme. And that's been a theme of the week, because it seems like KOC is saying it's scheme and Donatel's saying, no, it's execution. Where does Eric Kendricks fall in all this? Inman will give you the opening salvo.
Yeah, I just think for everything that we've seen, this brand new scheme, the adjustments that were made. Remember, a lot of these core guys, too, they're coming from that same Zimmer defense for multiple years in a row. Like some of them, that's all they've ever known. Like Kendricks and Hunter, they've only played in that Zimmer defense. So I'm kind of on the side of giving some of these defensive players a pass and not judging them too critically, because of the fact Ed Donatel just really hasn't put some of his best players in the best positions to be successful and maximize their own unique skill sets. Like Kendricks is going to finish the year as one of the top 3 tacklers on the team. But yeah, I mean, he's a linebacker. That's what you're supposed to do. I think the pass coverage specifically, where we all know he's always been one of the better coverage linebackers in the entire league in the past, now all of a sudden, just after a year or two, has dropped off to the point where he and Hicks are both in the bottom 10 of pass coverage linebackers, according to PFF. So I think that's what's frustrating me the most, and a lot of fans, because we know, you just didn't forget how to cover all these guys out of the flats and up the seam, things like that. Again, the production at the end of the year, he usually gets 3, 4, 5 sacks a season. That may decline. We haven't seen any interceptions. The tackles will still be there. I think for a lot of these defensive players, though, I'm leaning more towards it's on the Ed Donatel scheme, the play calls, and the fact that there just hasn't been a lot of in-game and even in-season adjustments up to this point.
Arif?
I think that there are a couple of elements at play here. I think one is adjustment to the scheme, like Luke said. I think that plays a pretty critical role. If you're a linebacker and your primary job is to kind of align everybody else on the defense, and you're responsible for getting all the calls in, manipulating the coverages when they, motion into or out of a particular set, and you've been calling one defense the entire time, and you then have to call a different defense when those adjustments happen. Your keys are a little bit different. The way that you drop in your depth and your landmarks are a little bit different. That's all going to impact you. I don't think that that's the majority of it, because, if good players will eventually, adjust by the time they're in week 14 or week 15 of the season. But I think that plays a pretty significant role. I think also on top of that, the nature of the scheme itself, which is not to say it's a good or a bad scheme, but the nature of the scheme itself forces a lot more underneath passes. It forces passes into those linebacker zones. There's going to be a lot more crossers, just because the way that teams try to beat, cover 2, cover 4, cover 6 type looks is to attack those underneath zones, which happen to be a little bit wider than if you were running a cover 3 or a cover 1, right? Because, cover 1's man coverage anyway. So a lot of that is to try and get receivers lined up against those linebackers, put them in awkward situations where they're running in difficult spaces, and cross them up a lot of the time. And so I think that that's part of it too. The assignments are getting pretty difficult for Kendricks as a result. And also, I think just on top of it, I think that it's designed to stress the linebackers. Like, I think it's designed to make the linebackers just do so much more, right? Like, think about, they always want to play with a light box against the run. Who does that stress the most? A linebacker. A linebacker just has to beat a block now that they didn't have to beat before. Same thing when they cloud up all of those, cornerbacks and safeties and stuff like that. The linebacker now has more depth that they have to cover back and width they have to cover wide. And so it is just really tough for a linebacker to look good in the scheme. I don't think that that's all of it. We've seen really good linebacker play in this scheme before in other teams. But I think all of these are playing a role, and they kind of combine together to make Kendricks look like a worse linebacker than he is. I think next year he'll be playing better.
Yeah, and I think he'll probably be going into a contract year next year, too. I don't think there's going to be an extension. And I also don't think they're going to cut him. Like, I think that is going to be sort of a play your way into the next deal kind of year for Kendricks. My only concern would be that he started to show some rust last year. He had an unbelievable 2-year peak. Age 27, age 28, right when he should be peaking, and he was unreal. Then last year, the tackling, the run defense dropped. And now this year, ostensibly, the pass defense dropping. And we don't know for sure whether that's all on him. But I would worry about that age cliff you talked about with Thielen. Now going into age 31 next year, how Kendricks will look if indeed that rust is legit. So I think that leaves Hunter. I want to get
just
the
real quick,
updated
just
Hunter
real quick,
take.
Sam. I know we keep talking about a lot of the contract. You mentioned Kendricks, the contract. You know, a lot of these big names have a ton of dead money, I believe. I think Kendricks is one of the only ones who hardly has any dead money, making him, I guess, the most susceptible to just being cut outright. Problem is, when I look at all those big names and I stack them up side by side, I don't think, for me anyways, Kendricks is near the top of the guys that I would just want to just go and cut as a cap casualty. So it's going to be interesting, just given the way all those big names and their contracts are set up and given how much dead cap there is. Kendricks, I believe, has one of the lowest dead cap numbers compared to the rest of the group. So that's going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, I think Jordan Hicks susceptible, though. He's also got a low dead cap. The Vikings could save $5 million by cutting Hicks. And it seems like Asamoah has already started the takeover, right? After seeing him get more and more reps, I could see Jordan Hicks being a camp cut heading into next year. That's probably a topic for another time. The messaging is changing on Danielle Hunter, and this is always frustrating when coaches before the year, they say, oh, Danielle looks great, he's taking to the scheme, and then you hear at December 13th, Ed Donatel saying, yeah, it's going to take the whole year. It's going to take the whole year for Danielle to figure out this scheme. That's frustrating to hear. Arif, your take on Danielle Hunter's play at the moment?
I think he's playing well. I don't know why Donatel would say that. That is ridiculous to me, especially because, 5 weeks ago, he's like, yeah, these things usually, take 4 or 5 weeks. And you're like, it's been 6, it's been 7, and now it's going to take the whole year. He's playing well. If you take a look at, and not that this is the end all be all, but this is a pretty reasonable proxy for, gut checking ourselves. If you take a look at the Pro Football Focus grades for all the defenders from the Minnesota Vikings, who has the highest grade? Mm-hmm. It's Danielle Hunter.
Danielle?
Yeah. He's playing. Yeah. It was za'darius Smith, which fair enough, right? But the last couple of games have been really good for Hunter. And if you just take a quick look at the film from this last game, I mean, he is just beating people instantly, right? The issue here was the coverage, right? Jared Goff's getting rid of the ball right away. But, he did a phenomenal job in this game, with a high win rate. Now, his pass rush win rate for the season, not great because of those first 5 or 6 weeks. That's fine. But he is a high-level run defender for the Vikings right now. He ranks second among Vikings in run stops. First is a linebacker, it's Jordan Hicks, not Eric Kendricks. I think that's really significant as an edge defender, especially when za'darius Smith is a little bit weaker as a run defender. Now, za'darius Smith has more pressures. He's got 70. Danielle Hunter has 49. But Hunter recently has been winning at a somewhat more consistent rate against much more difficult competition, as in the types of players that are going up against. When za'darius Smith is rushing like an injured Jonah Jackson, I guess he's not injured, but coming back from injury Jonah Jackson versus, Hunter taking on a left tackle, that is a much more difficult task, and he's winning. And so I think that Hunter is playing really good football right now. If I were Donatel, I would have just said, it doesn't always show up in the numbers. Jared Goff had to get rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds. I guess that's a number. Mm-hmm. But Jared Goff had to get rid of the ball right away. That's a product of how good the pass rush is. Now it's just up to the secondary to support them. Hunter's playing well. He wasn't playing this well at the beginning of the season. I'll acknowledge that. I was concerned about it, and I wanted to talk about it. We had a good discussion about that on this podcast. But he's playing well right now. I just find it really weird that Donatel's making excuses for him. Don't make excuses for him. Say the numbers are wrong.
Donatel thinks that he's actually helping the contract negotiation when actually he's hurting it, because he's telling the agent, hey, this is how he's playing when he doesn't get the scheme. Imagine when he gets the scheme. Luke Inman, some quick thoughts, and then we have Ron Johnson waiting in the wings. Luke, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, 7 sacks now. A chance he finishes with double-digit sacks now by year's end. Arif mentioned it. PFF has him as one of the highest defenders on the team. Every week I look at that ESPN win rates. He's always been flirting with top 10 of edge defenders in run-stop win rate. So I think he's been really, really solid. So we hear Donatel say, again, it takes time to make the switch. He'll get there. Don't worry about it. I think he's already there. He's just not cashing in on maybe the splash plays. It's not translating the good play into stats and numbers like we're used to seeing. It's just been a very quiet 7 sacks and 11 tackles for loss. For me, the fact that you watch some of these critical third downs this year, and Daniil or Z is dropping back in coverage. I think they've dropped back like 56 times this season. And that's fine if your defense is like producing on a high level, but when it's dead last in the league, like, stop trying to get cute, man. Like, what are we doing? This man should be rushing the passer every third down. They need to try to get back to just lining up my best guy versus your best guy and letting him do what he does best. And maybe that means letting him put his hand in the dirt a little bit more. But again, I think all in all, making the switch, I think he's done a really good job, especially the last 3-4 weeks. I certainly think he would have more of an impact this season if that secondary wasn't giving up so much cushion to the quarterback, like Arif mentioned.
Yeah.
He's getting the ball out of his hands so quickly. I don't care if you're Reggie White or Lawrence Taylor, like, you're not getting to the quarterback like last Sunday when Goff was getting that ball out with 2 seconds on that 5-step drop. It's just not humanly possible. There needs to be tighter coverage off the snap. Then we might start to see some of these front 7 guys, all of them, start putting up some more stats and production like we're used to seeing. But it's hard to fathom like every single player just dropped off and played defensively. And that's why I think the majority of this lies on the coordinator, the scheme, the play calling, the problems they've had in the back end with all those DB injuries throughout the year. I think all that stuff plays a factor.
Yeah, no doubt. They said this week they want to take air out of the coverage, so maybe a little bit more press. We'll see. We've got Ron Johnson coming up, and then we've got a thorough Indianapolis Colts preview that we will deliver. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. It's your number one source for betting trends, info, stats, analysis, and they've even got some great betting podcasts there as well. Get the latest odds and trends for the NFL, NBA, NCAA football, and basketball at BetOnline.net. Vikings have been 4-point favorites there throughout the week. Over-under 48.5. You can find those lines and those over-unders at BetOnline.net for every game. In Week 15, it's betonline.net. Get it on your mobile device. It's where the game starts.
Let's see who was lucky enough to get invited to today's party. It's time to meet our guest of honor.
Ron Johnson joins us now, host of the Ron Johnson Show, at 3Ron Johnson on Twitter. He's hosting on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and the roundtables on Friday. Ron, the question all week has been, is it scheme or is it execution for the Vikings defense? We've been going back and forth about it. Donatel's talked about it. KOC's talked about it. What do you think the issue is for this beleaguered Minnesota Vikings defense?
So I was a big proponent of the scheme possibly, but now after hearing the coach say it, and I don't think a coach would just flat out lie about it. I'm going to say I think that it is maybe a little bit of execution. And when he says execution, this is the thing for people to understand as a coach. I'm over here at TCO Performance Studios. I just got done shooting the Vikings podcast coming on. It's going to be on K-Fan, I think, Friday night at some point. But we talked about this. We talked about the Ed Donatel response. And so when you think about his response, he's not going to throw players under the bus. He's not going to flat out say, guys aren't paying attention or this specific guy, but there has to be moments in games. And that's the thing I always say, just because something happened, we don't know what the call actually was. We don't know if it was a man call that maybe 3 of the DBs went man, 1 guy went zone, screw up. If there's some pressure or blitz and the blitz is determined by, say it's the linebacker and he's supposed to go if the running back who's covering him, the running back he's covering stays in the block. Well, maybe that linebacker doesn't fire and doesn't go in, and he's just kind of in space, and we're all sitting there like, why is this guy covering green grass? A lot of little things like that where if guys aren't getting the call or aren't doing exactly what they're supposed to do, if a DN rushes inside and he should have stayed outside, which would have maybe freed up another guy coming, or if they were supposed to twist and one guy twists and the other guy stays, as long as 2 guys are in the same lane. Little stuff like that can be a huge deterrent in what the coach is trying to get accomplished. And if you think back to last year with the Lions game that they lost, and Cam Dancer should have just left his feet on the goal line, and they were playing cover 4, some type of red cover 4. Dancer backs up into the end zone, maybe 3-4 yards, catches it right in front of him, touchdown, game over. Mike Zimmer says, like, oh, if so-and-so had just done the call, maybe we don't lose that game. And that's probably true. If he stays on the goal line, Jared Goff doesn't make that throw. The fact that he backs, and then we don't get the video of his girlfriend celebrating because her boyfriend, Jared Goff, got the first win. And she's randomly doing a yellow bikini shoot the same week the Vikings are playing the Lions. Go figure. And she has to do the video in her bikini. She couldn't wait till she got to the hotel to find out they had just won his first game. Whatever.
It was live. What is she supposed to do? She doesn't pick. SI
Authentic
picks.
reaction,
Ron. What are you
Ron.
supposed to do?
Hey, sure. They had that video ready to go for whoever he won his first game against. They're like, no matter who, every week I need you in a yellow bikini just in case Jared Goff finally wins, and we're going to put this video out live. And then every week she's in that bikini on the beach. Like, did he win? Nope, they still lost. Oh, did they win yet? Nope. Okay, they finally won. Oh, my God. I'm so happy he won. Yeah, come on. Like, get out of here. I can't believe it. Like, you guys don't know. It's been so long since Jared Goff won a game. Like, I don't think you understand how important this is for us right now. Is my makeup okay? Is my makeup okay? Like, come on now. But anyway, when you think about those mistakes being made, the same can be said right now. Like, the same can be said for what's going on. So I'd say it's a little bit of both. I'd say maybe they can dial up the blitz a little bit more. But at the end of the day, if the scheme, if the guys aren't executing the scheme, how can we just flat out say it's the scheme? Like, I think it's year one. So there's a lot of growing within this defense. There's a lot of movement that we were waiting to see that we haven't seen. But maybe the calls are being made and they're not doing it. I don't see a coach getting up there flat out lying. Not to say coaches don't lie. But I gotta weigh both. I'd say it's a little bit of both. Scheme should.
Luke, what do you got?
Hey, Ron, big draft guy, as you know. You've started to see a lot of these top prospects take their bowl game off now the last 4 or 5 years, really since I think it kind of started with Jalen Smith, Notre Dame linebacker. He was projected in like the top 10. He got hurt in his bowl game. He falls to the second round. So now you see a lot of these top guys are skipping out. Just as a former player, like, does that bother you at all to see? Or do you think if you're in that locker room, like being another guy who's battling through his own injuries, still willing to go out there and do everything they can to just go out there for their team and finish the season on a high note? Or for some of them, I guess the last game of their careers, finish with a win. What's your take on all these top prospects skipping out to get ready for the draft, just as a former player yourself?
Well, I'm a true believer of whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like, there's a plan for you. God doesn't wish bad things to happen, but when bad things happen, God uses it as a moment to teach us. And this is what I say to guys that get hurt. It's a moment for you to realize, like, what's really important in your life to grow, whatever, blah, blah. Can you protect yourself from all injuries? No. I'm a big fan of Final Destination, the movie, for those that haven't seen it. If you cheat death once because somebody had a dream that we were going to die and he yanked all of us off the plane, we're going to die. Like, it's going to come get us. We're going to die in a lot worse. This is what I've learned. If you don't die the way you were supposed to die, it's going to get a lot worse. Like,
so you say Jalen Smith was going to get that knee injury, but just later?
Yeah, exactly. This is going to happen either way.
And he got it at a time now when he's in rehab. He's fine, But, Tanya Harding.
Someone's going to just take a sledge.
Oh, my God, he's got a bat. Look out.
All right. If Nancy, come here.
Exactly. If Nancy Kerrigan had gotten out of it, maybe. But, like, if you think about that movie, they should have all died on that plane. Then eventually one guy dies because he's lifting weights and the weight messes up and then smashes his head in. Like, put me on the plane. Like, just go ahead and blow the plane up. But anyway, I look at injuries like that. Like, some people assume, like, oh, if I miss this and I miss that, then I'll stay injury-free. Look at guys like Kirk Cousins. He doesn't miss anything, and he still walks away just fine. But then you look at guys that get hurt in practice. Like, oh, let me miss this, and then they still get hurt in practice. Look at the non-contact injuries out there, like Kyler Murray. Nobody touches you. So you can't say, oh, if I didn't take this hit, like, I get some of the head injury stuff, the concussion stuff. Yeah, you can definitely taper that back. But some of these other injuries, like, sometimes your body is just taking a take and eventually it's going to give. And that's what happens. It gives out, and you're going to get hurt. But for a quarterback, I get it, like shoulder, getting hit in the pocket, team not really bought in. Everybody's down here just to celebrate and have fun at the Citrus Bowl. We can't win a national championship. Honestly, it's the Citrus Bowl, though. That's a big one. I get some of these other ones, like the January 25th, 26th bowls, the 23rd. I think there's a bowl game on. I get some of those because it's like, look, like the peanut butter and jelly bowl in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Like, I'm good. I don't really care about the peanut butter and jelly bowl. But the Citrus Bowl, I might want to play in that one. I'd be interested to see too. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, if you have a chance to go to the NFL, you don't want to get hurt. But I just don't like that trend. I think, your teammates, you guys worked so hard for that to get to this point. Drew Brees was just named, I think, interim assistant coach for this game. Like, why not go get coached by Drew Brees for a game?
Yeah, I get both sides of it. I totally get it. Start to get prepped for the draft a little bit. Make sure you don't get hurt. Obviously, seeing a guy like Jalen Smith is going to be in the back of your mind if you're a top prospect looking at the mock drafts and stuff. But I think it kind of waters down some of these bowl games too. Like, as a fan, I just want to go see the top prospects out there go play these. So it's a little disappointing. But I totally get both sides of it. I was just curious, as a former player, maybe what's going on in that locker room. So that makes sense.
Yeah, for me, I do want to get back to this question about scheme versus execution. I want to kind of dig further into this question because Luke brought something up right before you came on about how many players have to play worse than they did last year before you decide maybe it is the coaching, which is not to say that the players are executing the scheme, right? It can be very well be the case that 3 or 4 players are not executing the scheme well. But then that sounds like, these are professional players, many of them gone to the Pro Bowl, then that sounds like a coaching problem, not a scheme problem. But if enough players are not executing, that sounds like a coaching problem to me. And so how long before you kind of, because, Cameron Dancer making a coverage mistake, that's in his history, right? One guy makes, consistent scheme mistakes. Okay, that's execution. 2 guys make consistent scheme mistakes. That's execution. Maybe we should get that in better personnel. 5 guys, including 3 Pro Bowlers. That sounds like a coaching problem to me, which is not me saying Ed Donatell's going up there and lying. It's me saying that maybe Donatell needs to reflect on how he gets across what he wants to have happen on the field.
Yeah, hear you yell 5 guys made me think of French fries and a hamburger, but
whole bag, man. They got all of them.
But so, like, behind me right now, there's a picture of Danielle Hunter behind me. I'm over here at TCO, like I said, Performance Studios, just shooting some content stuff. And when you think about this guy behind me, Danielle Hunter, in the 3-4 defense, he's not an outside linebacker. Let's be for real right now. He's not an outside linebacker. He is a defensive end. Now, is he athletic enough to drop into the flat and that? Yes. Is he as good at it as za'darius Smith? No. Can he rush the passer? Yes. When is he most effective? With his hand in the ground. So if I'm a coach, so to answer your question, a little bit of it does get back to coaching. And we had Glenn Mason on the Ron Johnson show. Go back and watch that episode with Glenn Mason. And if you think about Glenn Mason on there, by the way, after doing the Vikings pod too, in the middle, you'll hear it on K-Fan people. The Vikings podcast does promote the Ron Johnson show on all platforms. So was kind of cool to finally start being able to integrate that into the K-Fan radio stuff. Unfortunately, though, I know when people search the Ron Johnson show, you're going to get a white Republican. So that is not me. But anyway, so talking about Danielle Hunter with the 3-4 defense, here's the thing. The Gophers had this same problem. Carter Coughlin was an outside linebacker / defensive end. But when they had the 3-4, it wasn't working. They fire their defensive coordinator. Joe Rossi takes over as defensive coordinator. What does Joe Rossi do? He says, okay, Carter Coughlin's not that good at dropping into coverage. Carter Coughlin is not that good at doing this. But Carter Coughlin is excellent at rushing the quarterback. How do I get that scheme set up? Oh, let me see. Let me put Carter Coughlin's hand in the ground. He's going to be the 3rd or 4th defensive lineman on the line, but he's going to be in a wide technique to be more like an in linebacker. I'm going to have another backer or safety drop in the box and become my outside backer replace. And I'm going to let Carter Coughlin go after the quarterback as much as he needs to. Now, will I still drop him? Yes, because defense ends every once in a while. J.J. Watt had to drop back because he's had interceptions. Defense ends do have to drop back, but you can create like a cycle of like, Daniil, you're going to go after the quarterback every single play up until this point and then just drop back. But then go back after the quarterback. It becomes a hybrid 3-4. You still can have 3-4 principles. You still can have 3-4 scheme in the middle. You still can have your D tackles do what they do. But now Daniil Hunter becomes your forcible guy that always goes after the quarterback. It does hamstring Za'Darius Smith a little bit because Za'Darius has to become more of the true drop backer every time. But now you're getting the best out of Daniil Hunter, and you still have an outside linebacker who can do what he does, which is go after the quarterback, but also drop back. And then when you want to send both of those guys back, you just go to a different personnel. You put both of those guys in the game with one defensive lineman. Now you have one defensive lineman, two standing up linebackers, Daniil Hunter, Za'Darius Smith. You bring in DJ Wanham, who now becomes your true outside linebacker who can drop. You now bring in Cam Bynum into the box as your additional backer, or Brian Asamoah as your additional backer, and you still have your scheme. You still have 3 down linemen, but now 2 of them are outside linebackers. And one of them really is Daniil Hunter that wants to get up to the quarterback. So there's ways to do it. Honestly, I can say it all day long. It's not easy to teach. That's the problem. Like, we can say this all day. It's not easy to teach middle of the season to say, hey, we're going to do this, guys. Now, the Gophers did pull it off, but they didn't change much besides Carter Coughlin put his hand in the ground and went after the quarterback pretty much 90% of the time. And now he's with the Giants, and we'll see him Christmas Eve or whatever. So I think that's the key. Like, you can get to it in a scheme, but it's not always easy to get to it. But Glenn Mason, to the story, Glenn Mason said this on our show. He said he went to Woody Hayes once and said, hey, coach, I told this kid, 1,000 times, do this, do this, do this. We get to the game, he does something else. And Woody Hayes was like, you told him 1,000 times? He's like, yeah. He's like, I can't believe it, coach. I told him 1,000 times and he still didn't get it right. Woody Hayes looked Mason in the face and said, that's your fault. You're a horrible teacher. Like, if you tell a guy to do something that many times and he can't get it right, you suck as a teacher. And that's why PJ Fleck always says that. Like, he teaches every player differently, like he's in a 6th grade social studies class. Sometimes you have to get with a player who's not doing the scheme you want him to do and just talk to him and say, hey, how do you learn best? Like, do you need to have it written on the screen? You can get up on a whiteboard and explain it to the whole team. And in your mind, you're like, this makes total sense. Everybody should get it. But then there's that one DB in the back of the room like, man, what in the hell did he just say? Like, I heard Baby Shark do halfway through this. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. And then that coach can go to him and say, hey, you know when the receiver goes in motion and he goes from strong to weak and our linebacker yells out weak, weak, weak? And he's like, yeah, we're just changing the coverage to cover 2. Oh, that's what we're doing? Why didn't you just say that? Like, sometimes that's what coaches and players need to do, because everybody assumes they're on the same page, and I think that's maybe a little bit of what's going on is if you don't ask, you won't get helped. And my grandmother always said this, closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't tell me you're hungry, I'm not feeding you. I don't know. I'm grandma. I don't know you're hungry. So you got to tell me you're hungry, and I will go make you something. So I think some of these players or coaches, they need to just open up their mouth and say, hey, coach, I don't get it. You're not going to get cut because you didn't get it. You're going to get cut because you didn't do it right. But you're never going to get cut because you don't get it. Always ask. And that's what I was taught as a coach with Tony Dungy. When I was with the coach, hey, if the players don't know it, make sure to give them one-on-one time. And I would meet with Pierre. I mean, we had Pierre Garçon on the show, and we talked about that. Me and Pierre would get up together at 6 a.m., and we would meet, and we go over stuff. Why? Because he wanted to make sure he knew what he was doing, and that was the key. Reggie Wayne, I never had to meet with him because Reggie knew it all. Reggie knew what he was doing.
Yep. So what was it like being around a team that qualified for a Super Bowl? Like, what did you observe that year from that group?
Yeah, so I left midway through the season. That was the year Howard Mudd and Tom Moore fake retired. So they had to retire because their 401k would have been in jeopardy because they were 104 years old. And so at 104 years old, you can no longer have your 401k just sit there with all that equity. And what people don't know is the NFL would match us in our 401k 2-to-1 and 3-to-1, meaning you give us $12,000, $12,500, which is the max. They will give you $30,000. They will match it up to $10,000, 3-to-1 or 2-to-1. And that was the hardest concept for us to understand as 21, 22, 23-year-olds. I'm like, wait, if I give you $12,000, you're going to give me 20. How does this work? Like, this doesn't make sense. It seems fake. But I'm like, all right, I trust you. I will give you 12.5. You give me 20. Oh, I give you 12.5. You give me 30? Sure, let's do it. Okay. because of that match and the way the NFL 401k was set up, those two coaches had to fake retire, become executive assistants, and then that way they could still draw from their 401k and not get penalties. So I was bought in, and then eventually Jim Irsay was like, we have too many coaches. And Jim Irsay, yeah, because you can't be a coach and working and still draw from your 401k, but at a certain age, you have to start drawing because that's the reason why you have a retirement fund with the NFL.
Yeah.
And so those dudes are like,
tax advantaged. Yeah.
Exactly. They're like, man, we're making $2 million. I don't need to touch my 401k. And then the NFL was like, oh, you're going to touch it. You're going to touch this. Like, we're going to make you touch this. and so they figured out a loophole. The loophole was if we retire, now you think we're retired, and then we can take out a little bit and you'll leave us alone. And that's what they did. They fake retired. They came back as executive assistants, but they still did their regular jobs. I'm not going to lie. And so Jim Irsay kept up the facade all the way up until, I don't know, week 3 or 4. And then he let me and Frank Winters go. Frank Winters, former Packer, he was the offensive line guy that took over from Mudd. I took over for Clyde Christensen, who was taking over for Tom Moore, who was offensive coordinator. So that's what it was. But no, I was only there up and through September, October. So, but what I did notice, honestly, man, in the off season for sure, watching Peyton Manning build the championship culture and build what he was trying to get, and watching him draw back on old Tony Dungy-isms and the way the culture was built. What I noticed, honestly, man, was a lot of, I hate to use the word, but a lot of collaboration, what you're seeing from Kevin O'Connell. And it is important because the collaboration Peyton had was like clockwork. I would try to be the first coach there because I was the youngest. And so every time I would try, I would get beat because Peyton Manning would already be there. He'd be there at 5:40. If I knew I was going to be there at 5:50, he would be there at 5:45 somehow, some way. I'd be like, you know what, screw this. I'm going to get there at 5:40. All of a sudden, he's there at 5:35. I don't know what or how he did it, but he was magic. And every time he was there, he would have 2 or 3 receivers there with him. And Pierre confirmed this with Sam and I on the Ron Johnson show that, yeah, Peyton would reach out. We would say, hey, what was Peyton this morning? We'd already kind of know. He would take Dallas Clark or, Ben Utek, Pierre Garçon, Reggie Wayne. Those would be his 3 that day. Or, Joseph Adai. And he'd have 3 guys. And what he was doing with those 3 guys was building. He was running plays. He was running bunch sets. He wanted to see how those guys interacted together in routes. He wanted to see the timing of if this guy's hitting this post at this, where's this guy on the out? And he was learning. If Pierre's fast enough that when he hits the post, I know Reggie's now only 10 yards down the field. And so he was building that collaboration. But then also the hallways, the walkthroughs, the walkthroughs were fun. I remember Jeff Saturday making jokes about Peyton Manning taking forever in a 12-play walkthrough that we'd only be through 2 plays. And Jeff Saturday would always look at his watch man, we've done 2 plays and we've gone through 10 minutes and it's 2 plays. And he would sit down on the ground here we go again. Peyton's about to change the play again. Let's sit down. And it was all jokes, though. We would laugh and the coaches would laugh, but offensive linemen would follow Jeff and he'd sit down on the ground. And, and I think what that did, though, is that built them to be able to argue with each other later. And if you saw the clip of Jeff Saturday and Peyton that finally got released, so they were arguing on the sideline where Peyton comes off pissed off saying something. And Jeff Saturday's like, hey, we'll do our job. You shut up. You shut up. And Peyton's like, well, you get the – all right, I get it. Okay. And Peyton backed off. And I think that's what they had learned by collaborating. When it became an argument, it truly became a friendly, brotherly argument. It was never like with the Washington Commanders. You saw actual fists being thrown. It was more of I know you're just trying to get better, and I know you want greatness from us, and I want greatness from you. But they had built that. That's what that was. I noticed in the building. It was practicing together, competing together. The defense was trying to get the offense better. The offense was trying to get the defense better. But Peyton earned that respect with Jeff, and Jeff earned that respect the same way with Peyton. They both were ridiculously mental, the amount of things they could come up with and the ways they could Peyton would make the nickel cornerback. If you think about Shannon Sullivan being the nickel cornerback, he would say Mike 39 just because he wanted to throw the hot route. If he went Mike 39, that means the corner to the left of him has to blitz in order for Peyton to have a hot route. So what he's telling the offensive line is, hey, you guys got to block everybody else over here. Center, you're worried about 39. 39 is probably not coming, so don't worry about him. Just block these guys. And so he was trying to take some of that off of them so they weren't worried about the mic and they weren't worried about the blitzer. And he would understand the blitzes to where it became so easy. And little stuff like that, man, is what made them so good and so, I think they won 10 games in a row for like 4 straight years or something like that. I think Tony Dungy went like 10-0, like 4 straight years. I can't remember what the thing was. It was something ridiculous. But that's what happens when you have that collaboration, that culture built to be a champion. That's what it built. You know, it was never bad blood in the office. It was a friendly, like Peyton and Tony and, you know, all the way down to, you know, Pete Metzlars was there, former tight end from the Buffalo Bills. They would all have their families and kids running through the hallways before practice or after practice. You know, the moms would drop the kids off after school to the dads. And I mean, it was a true, like Tony really believed in friendly family atmospheres. And so it passed on to the players, where players were walking through the halls with their kids. And, you know, it was never one of those like, oh, kids are here, shut up now. You know, like, no, coaches would have kids in there. Like, I'll never forget one story before I go. Tony Dungy, and I'm hoping to get Tony on the show so we can talk about this, but before the Buccaneers played the Vikings, Tony Dungy's son and I were in the hotel room playing football with Ninja Turtles and G.I. Joes.
Ron, good stuff. We appreciate your time as always. At 3Ron Johnson on Twitter. He hosts the Ron Johnson Show. Right before we preview Colts and do our nerdy stats of the day, let me tell you about Built Bar. They've got some unreal, astonishing new reimagined flavors. We've told you about them before. We'll tell you about them again. Cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper, and a little holiday twist. White chocolate peppermint granola and candy cane brownie puff. That's a good stocking stuffer. If you're looking for something to put in your kids' stockings or your spouse's stockings, your significant others, look no further than Built Bar. They are good and good for you. The best tasting protein bars on the market. Revolutionizing nutrition. 100% real chocolate. High in protein, low in sugar, low in calories. Sink your teeth into it and change your life. No joke. You got to try these new Built Bars, and you can do so at 15% off if you order right now at Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. That's promo code LOCKEDON15. Matt, let's get some time on the clock for this one. I want to run down some Colts talkers. Let's do a minute each, go around the horn, starting with the following. How many years until Kirk Cousins is Matt Ryan? Because they are similarly physically gifted quarterbacks, I would say. Matt Ryan is falling off. This is the age cliff that we've talked about several times. It's been about 4 years in decline, and here we are now. He is limping to the finish line. How long until Kirk Cousins is at that point? Luke Inman, you care to start?
Yeah, when you look at Matt Ryan's production and just the longevity over his career, he kind of just started to fall off in his 12th season. He'd always been over 100 passer rating for a lot of those years, but in his 12th year to now, it's fallen closer to 90, if not worse. So if you think that's the precursor for Cousins, then I guess you're really waiting for next season, that'll be Kirk's 12th season, to see if that decline starts to happen. I personally don't think it will, at least not that drastically and not that quickly, because Matt Ryan was on some really bad Falcons teams after their Super Bowl window closed. And I think both these guys have a lot of similar qualities, not just in the fact that, you know, they're both pure pocket quarterbacks, but in the fact that they go as far as their surrounding talent will let them. And at their peak, they're both really good, accurate, smart quarterbacks when everything around them is good, when they've got the protection, when they got the weapons, they're up near that top tier or two of quarterbacks. But when things start to fall apart around them, Matt, the last few years in Atlanta, obviously this year with the Colts, we'll probably get into, their offensive line has been really bad. It's just so obvious they're not quarterbacks that are going to elevate the play around them a ton or mask some of their team's weaknesses. So I think the big thing to watch out for is what they do this offseason, the Vikings that is, and how they can continue to provide Kirk Cousins with some weapons. If that offensive line and protection is still good, if JJ and Thielen and KJ Hawkinson, they're all still out there, I think Kirk will still be at that first, second tier, depending on who you talk to in quarterback play, and you won't see that big drop-off unlike Matt Ryan has.
Arif?
Right, I agree with Luke that from a characteristic standpoint, they are pretty similar quarterbacks. They are drop-back passers, not very athletic. They do well off of play action. They do best in a West Coast scheme. They rely basically on the players around them to elevate their play, not vice versa. They don't do extraordinarily well under pressure. All of that is true, but I think still Matt Ryan has been and will be a more volatile quarterback. His highs are higher, his lows are lower, and so when he does hit his cliff, his lows are extremely low. He's 3 years older than Kirk Cousins, but but he's got 7 more years of experience. Kirk Cousins didn't start right away. So I do think that Kirk Cousins has a little bit more left in him for those two reasons, that he's been more consistent year to year than Matt Ryan, that he's taken less hits, that he hasn't played in the NFL as often or as long as Matt Ryan has, honestly, I mean, like Matt Ryan has never made consecutive Pro Bowls, right? He's had 4 Pro Bowl appearances, never consecutive. And it's because, he relies a little bit more on a good offensive coordinator and a good receiving core than even Kirk Cousins does. And so I think, even though his highs are a little bit higher, I think that volatility speaks to why he dropped off the way that he did. I think Cousins has just a couple more years left in him than Ryan does.
Ryan, from his age 34 season until now, that's 2019 until now, he's 22, 36, and 1, 85 to 50 touchdown to interception ratio, sack rate 7%. I mean, a statue back there. And that decline has been very linear. He had a pretty outstanding 2018, even though the team wasn't great. But statistically, it was excellent. And every year has gotten just a little bit worse. Now, Kirk Cousins, you might say, is having a statistical decline this year in his age 34 season. But I think there's still a belief, at least for me, that his age 35 season could be kind of back where it was last year statistically, if he does get pretty comfortable in this scheme. So I think we're all saying the same thing. I think we all believe Kirk has maybe a little longer shelf life than Matt Ryan. And for whatever reason, Kirk has looked more athletic this year than past years. Yeah. He's moving better in the pocket. Mm-hmm. He's scrambling occasionally. What's going on here? So I think that Kirk probably ages a little slower. I'd say at 36 we start to see that decline. So I'll give him 3 more years.
Yeah, and just real quick, I think to all of our points, Ryan's played 233 games. Kirk's played 138. So Ryan's played almost 100 more games than him. Ryan's taken an average of 32 sacks every season. Kirk, surprisingly, only averaged 25 sacks per season. I'd be very curious to know the amount of hits that they've both taken. I couldn't find that number, but if anybody can find that, that'd be cool. Just be cool to compare the two as far as sacks per year on any given average during their career, and then how many hits, though, that they've actually taken, and go a long way to figure out, again, the longevity and when that drop-off could start to happen. Comparing them just to Matt Ryan, of course.
Yeah, Luke, and I don't know about career, but just looking at this year, Kirk Cousins leads the league in hits taken with 67. So he's been battered this year for sure. Moving on, next topic. Matchup to watch. Arif, what are you watching for on Saturday that is most compelling to you?
Sam, I like a lot of the players in the Colts, as bad as they've been this year. I like Michael Pittman a lot. I like Alec Pierce a lot. I even like Kwity Paye. And if Yannick Ngakoue was playing a little bit better this year, that would be an intriguing matchup to watch, given his short history with the Vikings as their sack leader. But I think that the one that matters the most is going to be how that offensive line plays against the Vikings front seven. I think that offensive line has had a really up and down year. They've had some really good games, like against, the Philadelphia Eagles, and they've had some pretty bad games like last week. I think that, what we're seeing from Jonathan Taylor, which I know that you teased earlier on, that Taylor's not playing all that well or is not putting up as much production. I think that has a little bit to do with Taylor, but a lot to do with how poorly that offensive line is blocking. Some of that, they've got some retirements, Anthony Costanzo. Some of that is that Quentin Nelson's not playing that well. Either way, how they're doing, I think, is going to define the matchup in a big way, not just in the run game. Also, Matt Ryan is pretty poor under pressure. How the Vikings have the ability to pass rush against the Colts, which I'm going to talk about in the stat of the day, is also going to help kind of define this matchup. So it's the offensive line against that front seven. That to me is the matchup to watch.
Yeah, well, after talking with Jake Arthur, Locked On Colts this morning, I was reminded of just how dominant their two tackles are playing defensively. Obviously, DeForest Buckner, he's a stud, but Grover Stewart, their nose tackle, playing at a crazy high level right now. 59 tackles, 3 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. With 4 weeks to play, those are great numbers for a nose tackle. And the fact the guy next to him, Buckner, is also dominant at what he does. After watching Ed Ekstrom last week just get blown off the ball, snap in, snap out, we just talked about how Kirk needs that clean pocket. If they can push the pocket from the interior, a quarterback's worst nightmare, against Ingram and Bradbury, who's coming off an injury, it might be a really long day for this offense against a low-key, very solid defense despite the 4-8-1 record. The other guy he mentioned is Kenny Moore, and another cornerback who could miss the game. Isaiah Rodgers, their other cornerback, he's like 5'9", $170. He held his own against Devontae Adams and the Raiders. He had 2 pass deflections that game. He's playing some really good ball. He's really confident right now. So him and Gilmore, who's still one of the best in the business, these wideouts might have a hard time separating, giving Kirk some difficult, tight windows to throw into all day long Saturday.
Yeah, I think the matchup that you're looking for is always, how can you get Justin Jefferson in the most favorable spot? Stephon Gilmore, excellent this year. Top 10 PFF corner. Isaiah Rodgers, rotational corner, still very, very good. Number 2, actually, in PFF this year. Kenny Moore is the weak link, and he's DNP right now with an ankle, so he might be out. So whoever is in Kenny Moore's place in the slot, that's who the Vikings want. That's who they want to get that one-on-one matchup with. Doesn't always happen as easily in the slot to get those one-on-one matchups. The outside guys seem pretty sturdy for Indianapolis. Then again, is there anybody that you don't trust Justin Jefferson going one-on-one against? Even top 10 level corners? Probably not. You probably still like a one-on-one matchup against anybody at this point. But keep an eye on the depth of the cornerbacks for the Colts. Kenny Moore has been extremely ordinary. If he does play, he might be playing banged up, and that's another very favorable matchup for the Vikings. And yeah, revenge game. Yannick Ngakoue. Let's clarify, the sack leader, Yannick Ngakoue, from the 2020 Vikings. Still one of the craziest stats of all time. He plays 6 games. He leads them in sacks. I'm right about that, correct? Or did someone pass him at the very end?
No. He finished the season as the sack leader.
Mm-hmm. Just stupid.
I believe he is the sack leader for the Colts as well. Just, throwing that out there.
No, he is. He is for sure. Last one on the Colts, Jonathan Taylor. What happened? Why can't he run the ball? Luke Inman, we'll start with you on the ailing Colts running attack.
Yeah, I turned to Jake Arthur this morning, Locked on Colts. He said the offensive line has just been a mess all season. He started the year hot versus the Texans week 1, $150, had a touchdown, looked great. And then ever since then, they've just struggled to do anything offensively, not just run the ball, but anything really, with a really banged up offensive line unit that has struggled. They've rotated multiple different guys in and out. They've struggled at tackle and the interior. Now, we'll say the splits the last 4 weeks or so since Saturday has taken over have changed quite a bit. He's now back to averaging around 100 yards per game again the last few weeks, and a lot of that has to do with the fact they're finally getting settled into the same starting 5 offensive linemen week in and week out for the first time really all year. So coming off the bye week, now I'd expect them to at least try to continue and ride that momentum and get Jonathan Taylor rolling again. They know their offense, and Matt Ryan leans on that running game quite a bit for the rest of the passing attack.
Yeah, I can't say sorry. Go Arif. I can't say I disagree with Luke. I don't think that Jonathan Taylor himself is playing, poorly. I think that, some of the explosiveness that we wanted to see, he's not really always hitting that second gear, but I think it might be 10%, him playing below a level that, was frankly, in a previous generation of football would have been an MVP year, right? And it's just everybody plays worse after an MVP year because generally it's the peak of your performance. So I think that's some of it, but I think a lot of it is just this offensive line, like, Luke alluded to with his podcast with Jake Arthur, having that rotation along the offensive line, not knowing who you're playing at right tackle, not knowing who you're going to be playing at center, keep on changing those guys, and then knowing that your left tackle retired right before the season, going through a number of those players is going to impact the communication, especially if you're going to do double teams or zone communication. And they're just simply not blocking that well. Like Quentin Nelson last year was one of the best guards in the NFL, if not the best. He's certainly in the conversation top 3. Now, I don't know that he's playing like a top 10 guard. It is really rough out there.
Analytics fans rejoice. Woo-hoo-hoo! It's time to get educated.
Whoa, you're blowing my mind right now.
With the nerdy stat of the day.
Yeah, I had nothing really to add more on the Jonathan Taylor issue other than Colts are now 21st in run blocking. They've been top 10 in the past 4 years, now 21st. Ankle injury also for Taylor. But nerdy stats of the day. Dalvin Cook, speaking of running backs. We've been talking about scheme versus execution, right? And I think we all agree that the Vikings run blocking has been at issue this year as well. But Dalvin Cook is on track for a minus 23 yards under expected this year. 10th lowest in the league per next gen. Would be the first time he's ever been negative in his career. And there's been a lot of numbers, too, about, being contacted behind the line of scrimmage has been really poor. His explosive runs are down, all of that. But minus 23 yards, under expected at the moment. So Dalvin Cook not having a tremendous individual year as well. That's my nerdy stat of the day. Arif, what do you got?
All right, so if you take a look, and I bet Luke was going to try and steal this, but you got to me first. If you take a look at pass block win rate, we've been talking about this every couple of weeks. Pass block win rate, which measures how often an offensive line, prevents somebody from getting past them in the first 2.5 seconds of a snap. It does not measure pressures, although they are highly correlated because the quarterback can get rid of the ball before a defensive lineman arrives. So the pass block win rate, which correlates to wins better than pressure rate does, tells us that the Colts have the worst pass blocking unit in the NFL. Now, that has changed a little bit because of the changes along the offensive line as they try and figure out who's going to work for them. But it is the fact that they are not very good at preventing pressure. Now, Matt Ryan only sees a pressure rate at 33%. That's half. That's halfway through the league. That's ranked in the middle. So why is that? That's because Matt Ryan gets rid of the ball faster than almost everyone else in the NFL and has the lowest depth of target in a clean pocket of anyone else in the NFL at 5.9 average depth of targets or yards downfield from the line of scrimmage. So because that offensive line consistently loses and because Matt Ryan is terrified of getting hit, he's no Kirk Cousins, he gets rid of the ball well before somebody gets into the pocket, knowing that someone is beating that offensive lineman. But his yards per attempt in a clean pocket is not that bad. So it's on the Vikings when they get pressure to tackle well, because that ball is going to go underneath. It's going to go to somebody like Jonathan Taylor. It's going to go to a big guy like Alec Pierce or Michael Pittman, and they're going to need to be able to bring somebody down.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'll flip to the other side, too. Their team run stop win rate, number 6 in the league. So those two defensive tackles are playing out of their mind right now. But their pass rush win rate, as bad as the Vikings have been, they're tied for dead last. Indianapolis Colts are at 29th. So their pass rush has not been good either. I looked at the total QB EPA when it matters most. So when the team win probability is within 40 to 60%. So when it's close or down in crunch time, Kirk Cousins is 3rd in the NFL, only behind Patrick Mahomes and Geno Smith, out of all people, actually. There's a big drop-off, too, to Hurts, Josh Allen, and he's well ahead of guys, too, like Tua, Jared Goff, Tom Brady, and even Justin Herbert. So thought that was interesting.
Cousins.
I don't think that one's going to catch on. But
trademark.
Who's that Patrick Mahomes guy? I've never heard. Play for the Twins?
Don't worry about him. He's a flash in the pan. He won't be around.
Yeah. It's just, like a 2-pitch reliever. Doesn't have a lot on his fastball.
Hey, another one, not a very nerdy stat, just real quick. Za'Darius Smith leads the NFL in quarterback hurries, and Danielle Hunter ranks tied for 4th in quarterback hurries. Didn't know that either. That was surprising.
Telling you.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. Dude, Donatello should have just pumped him up instead of made excuses.
Right.
No, they're playing well. You're all dumb.
Yeah.
All right, we've got bets to make. Luke Braun is out, but he sent me his picks. This is the situation. Luke Braun and I are in a fierce battle for last. We are both well into the negatives. I'm minus 824. Luke is minus 991. Inman, you're in the lead, 662. And Arif, you're at 348 in the positive. Remember, we all started with 1,000 mythical dollars. We do one pick against the spread, one over-under each week. Minimum bet, 150 this week. Max bet, 1,500. Luke Braun, the absent one, gets to choose first. He goes Bengals. He has minus 3.5. Let's verify that.
It's minus 3 now.
Okay. I'm bringing it up right now. So the Bengals play who exactly? The Bucks.
The
minus 3.5. I'm seeing 3.5.
It's minus 3.5 again. Okay, perfect.
Minus 108, and he's putting max bet on it. So Bengals minus 3.5. Max bet minus 108. The next pick goes to me, and I am going to fade the Browns again because it worked for me last week, and it will continue to work because Deshaun Watson is just gonna be bad this year. I don't care if it's Tyler Huntley. I like Ravens plus 2.5 at Cleveland. And I, too, am putting a max bet on it. Fade Watson. That's my strategy.
All right, student versus the teacher. Patriots, Raiders. Bill Belichick versus Josh McDaniels. No way Belichick's going to let Josh McDaniels beat him head-to-head. I'm going to take the Patriots. I can't believe it's a pick'em. It's a pick'em in Vegas. I'll take the Patriots. I'm going to go with $300. I'm going to bump it up just a little bit. I've been staying consistent at $250. I got Patriots at a pick'em at -110 for $300.
Okay. 2 for Arif.
All right. Don't love the picks I have available. I really wanted that Bengals pick. Don't know why it was at 3.5. That's ridiculous to me. Instead, I'll take the Lions, a pick'em versus the Jets -105 for, I don't know, $200. That sounds about right. No, let's make it $225. I love, how the Lions play. They're both fairly complete teams without quarterbacks, and for fairly complete teams without quarterbacks, the Lions do have the better non-quarterback at quarterback. So I think I'll pick them. But I do think that this matchup is going to be a lot of fun for people who like old school football. As for my over-under, again, don't love these matchups. I think I'm going to take Seattle-San Francisco. That's tonight. Under 43 -110. That I'm going to go for $200. Geno Smith has fallen off a little bit. I love Brock Purdy and how he's played. I just don't trust the last pick in the draft, a rookie, to sustain some level of success. I think both defenses will be playing pretty well.
Mm-hmm. All right, Luke.
Like that. I'm going to take the under in the Philadelphia Eagles, Chicago Bears at Soldier. Should be snowy, should be cold. I think the Eagles jump out to a big lead out in front early on. They run out the clock the rest of the way. I'm going to take the under 48.5. I think it's at -108 is what I'm seeing, and I'll stay consistent, $300.
-108. So that leaves me. So I need to do an over-under. I think the Dolphins-Bills under is beckoning here because we're talking 9 inches of snow. It's going to be a snow globe. And that I'm just going to count on the weather playing a massive factor here. If they don't get the snow, then I'm screwed because Dolphins and Bills could hang 80. But I'm going to count on a snow game in Buffalo. 43.5 is the number. Arif or Luke, can you give me the odds on that?
Under at 106 is what I see online.
Yep.
Under 44. Yeah. Yep. 106.
Okay. Going max. I just got to go 2-0. 1 week. Just 1 week. I need to have a perfect week. It's been tough to come by.
Makes sense. In theory.
Luke Braun has the final selection. He likes Vikings Colts over 48.5. So he is counting on the defense to remain porous. Vikings Colts. He puts 200 on it. So Braun is going all in on the Bengals here. He did max bet on Bengals and 200 on Vikings Colts. What are the odds on that? Anybody?
Over 47.5, 106, -106 on the over.
Yep.
It's funny. Everybody's looking at the Vikings saying this has got to be a get-right game. You got to imagine the Colts offense is looking this as a get-right game too, right?
Yeah, I would imagine for the Colts offense, like, well, if we can't throw against these guys.
Right. If we can't run,
this is what you would call,
what
gentlemen, this is a stoppable force meeting a movable object.
There you go.
That's good.
That was could care less, huh?
That was a long show. We're going to forgo party fouls, and we'll have a show for you on Monday reacting to Vikings Colts. Luke Braun, hopefully back with us. Guys, fun stuff. Arif, Pro Football Network, check out his work there. Luke Inman, Superior Sports Talk with Reggie Wilson. He's at Luke_Spinman. I'm Sam Ekstrom, Ron Johnson Show, and the Minnesota Football Party. We're free and available. Find us wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, on Amazon Fire and Roku as well. We're everywhere. We'll see you on Monday.